Hi, it's Lily here from Heal Scotland with the Help Yourself podcast, and I am delighted to have an old friend of mine, Donal O'Neill, with us today. He's a filmmaker. Now, Donal and I don't know if you remember, Donal, we met each other about 4 a.m. outside, I think it was Med-Asia or Mario's in Malta a long time ago. And it was your sense of humour. We just clicked. And so I've been able to observe and watch your journey over the last, it must be 8 years. And you have made Serial Killers, Don't Fear Fat, and you're working, you're just finished your latest documentary. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure, and I think you talk about the sense of humour, and my recollection is that you laughed at my hair and told me it looked like a hat at the time. So, Lilia is a tremendous hairdresser, everybody, in case you don't know. So yeah, since we met, that's the journey I've been on. It was 2010 when I started researching heart disease, because I come from a family of lean, athletic men who are pretty good at sports, but we go on to develop things like heart disease and diabetes, and I wanted to know why that happened when we weren't putting on weight. And my father was always told he was a vigorous and healthy man. So fortunately, the heart attack didn't take him, but it certainly took my interest. And at that point, I just jumped in and started immersing myself in the research and trying to understand more about why somebody who is being told he's in great nick is having a heart attack. So that's what started it for me. I never planned to make a movie. I thought I'd write a book. I did that, and then I realized no one's going to read that, because who am I to talk about heart disease? So that all came to a head with the production that is Serial Killers, which was released in 2013. And I wasn't sure anybody would watch that either, but fortunately they did. It's now been viewed by over 3 million people. And after that, we made a movie with a world Ironman champion and Silicon Valley titan called Sami Inkinen, and that was run on fat when Sami and his wife rode from San Francisco to Hawaii just for fun, and to raise awareness of why we shouldn't be consuming too much sugar. That then led to the next movie, which was called The Big Fat Fix. That was kickstarted under the Pioppi protocol banner with the great UK cardiologist, Dr. Asim Malhotra. Asim is now a good friend and business partner of mine, and we went on to co-author the Pioppi diet, which was released in 2017, and that became a bestseller in the UK, the Netherlands, and some other countries, thankfully. And from there, we were then approached by a fantastic company in Salerno in southern Italy, which is about 1 hour from the village of Pioppi, where we had filmed. And as a result of that, we're now pushing out in 2020 with a UK company called the Pioppi Protocol, which essentially provides a lifestyle medicine platform to allow, let's say, Asim as a cardiologist, to allow his principles to reach millions as opposed to tens, if not hundreds, through his own practice. So that's exciting. And last year, we continued the heart disease theme with our latest movie, which is called Extra Time, where we took 2 very famous sporting teams in Ireland who contested the 1991 All-Ireland Gaelic football final. And we did a replay off the pitch almost 30 years later to see which team was the healthiest. And this was 48 individuals with an average age ranging in the sort of low 50s, 53, 54. We found some stunningly good and stunningly bad results, which indicated a couple of things. Most importantly, that your blood work is not enough, it doesn't tell you enough. And we used a CSC scan, which is a CT scan of the arteries, kind of like a mammogram that shows you if there's any calcium buildup in the arteries. So irrespective of what your blood says, the way that you can actually see if heart disease is manifesting itself in your arteries is to look for calcium. And we did that thanks to some support from the Irish Heart Disease Awareness Charity, who promote the use of this scan. And that was started by a very successful Irish businessman called David Bobbitt, who thought he was remarkably healthy at 50 years of age and discovered that his arteries were not, just by pure chance, as he undertook one of these scans himself in the US. So that's it in a 3-4 minute nutshell. That's how we got to where we are today.
You've managed to achieve quite a lot since I met you that night, and I'm glad to see you've got.
And I still have my hair.
Yeah, so I think one of the main things that you were saying there, I want to just talk a little bit about serial killers because I think, for people that have not watched any of your work, that's really a good place to start, isn't it? It's been a progression. And I just loved the graphics in Serial Killers, which is you lying in a coffin covered in cornflakes. And obviously serial spelled Cereal. So can you just give us a brief outline about what Serial Killers is about?
Yeah, pretty straightforward. I was influenced by particularly movies like Super Size Me. I think it's always more interesting to a viewer to see a personal journey. Statistics are dreadfully unappealing to the general public. They're dreadfully unappealing to even me as I research this, but they are important. But the question is, how do you convince a human being to change their behavior? And that's actually a very difficult thing to do. So in Serial Killers, I'd done everything from intermittent fasting way back when there was probably only 2 people on the internet who were really driving that. And they have been forgotten, which I think is kind of unfair, but that's life. But when we got to the actual production itself, I honed it down to say, right, let's just eat a ketogenic diet for 30 days and see what happens. And it was the first diet to reference ketones and all of that. And I honestly didn't know what would happen. I couldn't say with 100% conviction. So I went in with, let's say, an informed opinion. And I got lucky because I had recently moved to South Africa after a dramatic tech company failure in Malta, which was when I met you. I was probably drowning my sorrows that night at 4 a.m. And I just wanted to do something meaningful. And I felt that this was something that was worth a crack. I had no idea how to make a movie, so I came across my director, Yolanda Barker, a fantastic Irish girl, and Yolanda was a vegan at the time, so the idea of me eating 2 kilos of meat every week and 30 eggs was a bit of a conversation with her, but she's since directed all of my movies, and I've worked with the same team since. And yeah, we just followed me for 30 days as I ate a ketogenic diet, and we drew bloods before and after to see what would happen. And I mean, the results were pretty profound. And I don't think any of that would have happened, it's fair to say, without the intervention and support of Professor Tim Noakes, who had literally just arrived at a very similar place to myself through his own research. And obviously he's somebody who's very much better equipped to understand data and research than I. So he took me under his wing and was very supportive and has become a very good friend and mentor in the years since.
Yeah, an amazing man. Yeah, and talk about the exercise that you did, because I saw you when you'd done the month-long program. Remember, I was like, take your shirt off, and because you were totally ripped. I was like, what the hell? 4 weeks, and I mean, you're always looked physically fit, but I mean, that's really what got my attention. I was like, wow, in 4 weeks, just with the change in macros, really, isn't it? The percentages of macros and the short time of training that you were doing.
Yeah, I was doing about let's say 8 minutes of work each week, broken into 3 different training sessions. So I did a set of sprints and then 2 Tabata sessions, which would be 4 minutes, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off times 8, and that was pretty much it. So I had to step back from how I would normally have worked out, which might have been a little bit more aggressive than that. But again, that was all part and parcel of the research, and it panned out in the end. But it did completely strip me. My waist hasn't changed. As you know, I mean, I was a very mediocre, I might say, international track and field athlete many years ago. And my weight hasn't really fluctuated very much at all since then. So I've never had a weight problem, but my family don't have weight problems. They have atherosclerosis and type 2 diabetes problems without actually putting on weight. So I was interested in something else. And the particular markers that interested me, perhaps more so than some of the typical things that people look at, would have been the inflammatory markers. So there was really no inflammation in my body, and it was in a state of calm, shall we say. I didn't continue to religiously consume a ketogenic diet. I used different tools and tricks and your body does change as you age. So I found that it stripped me so much. I mean, a plastic surgeon approached me after a screening in Durban here. There were 300 people there, and he stormed the stage to tell me that I needed to keep doing whatever I was doing at that point, because he started to explain to me what he could see happening in my face as we went through the 30 days in the movie. And he said, you know, you look way better now. He said, if you kept doing that, he says, ABCD is going to happen, and you know, you're going to look like you're 92 years old. So I backed off, but you know, I do not eat a typical high carbohydrate athletic diet as I once would have done for many, many years. Mm-hmm. And we did find the implications of that in this most recent movie when I myself had a scan. So yeah, but it was the starting point for everything. And you know, at one point I thought I was literally going to lose my shirt, but thankfully, thanks to my experience in my enormous tech company failure, I had a very good inkling of how the internet worked at that point, if not the movie industry. And I managed to get the movie out directly. And to this day, it's been pirated, of course, and it's become something of an underground hit, but it still sells even today. So it's been a remarkable thing in hindsight. And
then what came after that was it the Big Fat Fix or Don't Fear Fat? Which one was next?
Now, Don't Fear Fat was actually the strap line for serial killers. Run on Fat was the second movie.
Right.
So that was kind of Serial Killers 2, if you like. And what happened after we released Serial Killers, in which Tim Noakes, who's kind of he was really the godfather of carbohydrate loading for sports performance, mm-hmm. and he's the author of a book that every endurance athlete of any kudos would have encountered and read. It's called The Lore of Running. And Noakes actually tore out the chapter on carb loading in that
I remember that, yes.
So that was iconic, and that was down to very good direction by Yola at the time. But off the back of that one scene, Sammy Inkinen contacted me from San Francisco. He told me who he was. He said, listen, I'm a world amateur Ironman champion. And, you know, as I was world champion, I also developed, very, very close to, I should say, developed type 2 diabetes. So he was pre-diabetic, despite being an absolutely elite sort of 8-hour 25 Ironman champion. So off to one side, he was also building a multi-billion-dollar company. So he's a different animal. But he was shocked to discover that although he was athletically supreme, he was his health was being challenged in a very sinister manner. So Sammy he said to me, listen, I've adjusted my own diet. I've reversed the pre-diabetes. I've taken that out of the equation, and I'm performing better than ever. So I went to see him in San Francisco, sat down for a coffee, and when people ask me what he's like, I say, well, he looks like Matt Damon, runs like a Maasai warrior, and thinks like Steve Jobs. So of course I asked him, did he want to be in a movie? And that wasn't my intent. I just met him and it was inspired.
Yes.
And thought, you know, everyone's going to love Sammy. So he said, yeah, why not? And then, you know, as part of that, we tracked himself and his wife Meredith. He was also an athlete, and they basically rowed a boat from the west coast of the US over to Hawaii, and they smashed the world record. They broke all the rules. They'd never rowed a boat before. And for the last week, I think they were rowing for 20 hours a day. And when they got off the boat, you know, we looked at their blood work and all of that. They were being medically supervised, obviously. And again, there was no inflammation in the body. So they'd run the equivalent of 2 marathons a day for 40 days or something, and get off the boat, and the bodies looked like they'd flown business class. And Meredith was the big star, by the way. They beat 4-man teams, and Meredith is she's not a physically big person, but she's you know, an excellent endurance athlete. But her weight didn't budge throughout the duration of that trip. So it was a remarkable feat, and we featured that, and then we questioned the viability of carbohydrate loading for performance, and if it was suitable for everybody. And we now know it's not, but you know, the sports scientists got very upset at that suggestion, and you know, this belief that you absolutely must have carbohydrates for performance. is it's fine if you're somebody who's insulin sensitive and you've had a HOMA-IR test and you know that it's not doing you any damage, but it wasn't fine for Sammy Inkin, and he was a world champion. And the reality is, you know, people are running, they might be running more, but they're running very, very slow. We're not, you know, we're not talking about athletes, we're talking about people who move at a very slow pace. So it's really not fueling strategies. You know, as a former athlete, I mean, I look at it and think, well, you're not even training properly. You're not, you know, let's face it, you're crap. Okay, you love it, but I mean, you've no business smashing the carbs if you're an overweight 10K runner, and there's a lot of them around, and people get annoyed at suggestions like that. But that is the reality of it. And you know, the average person to look at sports science and see how they've manipulated fueling strategies for athletes, it's just nonsense. And you know, George Best went out on the pitch after a steak breakfast, and that's what people would be better off doing 9 times out of 10, unless you're an elite performer, your life depends on it, and you're going to get paid. I don't see why you would smash a lot of the crap that people put into their bodies to try and better a very poor 10K time.
But you were really changing a culture where, you know, which I was part of, which was that, you know, meat, animal protein was dangerous, and that's what, you know, it was the fat that furred up your arteries, which we now know is a lot of rubbish. But to change people, so women in particular that I can vouch for, you know, cut fat out thinking they've become slim, and of course the very opposite thing happened. So that don't fear fat is, you know, I think it's even still around. But you know, the other thing on Sammy Innikin was, it turned out when you were telling me about him, I was like, that rings a bell. And then it turns out I know his sister, Suvi.
That's right.
And I'd been with her in Malta. We'd actually stopped somewhere so that she could talk to him, because she was concerned, obviously, about him leaving to sail across to Hawaii. And I was with her when she called him, and I was like, I can't imagine if it was one of my brothers doing that. And then you're talking, I'm like, it's got to be. I mean, how crazy is that? Yeah, so that was that. I mean, you've just managed to get such fantastic stories, but let's just talk now about the latest one, Extra Time, which I think is a really, you know, really apt name as well, because I think the main thing is the current tests that we're using may not be indicative of a sinister problem within the arteries, really. Would you say that's a fair?
Oh, that's it. You've hit it on the head, Lilia. That's exactly it. And one of the bigger problems still, I mean, obviously I'm from Northern Ireland, you're from Scotland, so we're kind of, you know, kindred congregations, but our cohorts, we're absolutely world champions at just dropping dead in middle age, particularly if we're men. And, you know, William Davis, one of the cardiologists we interviewed for the movie, you know, he just said, listen, he says, most people don't give a crap about heart disease until something happens. And that's the reality. It's, you know, even over all the years, we've now got tens of thousands on our email lists and everything else, but 70% of them are women between the ages of 35 and 60. It's very hard to catch the imagination of a middle-aged bloke. We all think we're invincible, and we get very ingrained ideas of what's right. Just because I've been eating this way for 50 years, I'm an expert. Well, no, you're not. You know, you'll spend more on your car than you will on your body. Yeah. And you know, it's a very difficult audience to reach. So I'd come up with a concept several years ago. I thought, and I'd worked in the sports marketing industry for 15 years, so I knew the power of endorsement, because, you know, like it or lump it, people listen to what, you know, sporting heroes and icons have to say, and that's very often used for the wrong reasons. So I thought, well, maybe we can turn that around and use it for the right reasons, because these teams, I mean, if somebody's in Scotland, it would be the Scottish Cup final, you know, Glasgow Rangers teams from the early 90s. People in Scotland will know who they are.
Yes.
And nothing else kind of matters. But if, you know, in Ireland, Gaelic football is our biggest sport. So if you take the biggest day in the biggest sport in 1991, that was the third Sunday in September when the County Down defeated County Meath in the final. And Meath were like this, you know, all-conquering team that couldn't be beaten, and Down hadn't won since my father's era. So they were coming up as complete underdogs, and it was a magnificent game and a magnificent win for Down. So people remember it as an epic confrontation. But yet when those players, when they retire, they kind of slip out of the public consciousness. But I'm betting on the fact that there'll always be a keen interest in where these men go to. This will not interest non-sporting fans. I'm fully aware of that. And it's a bit of a cheap shot because we're using footage from the original game, and we're cutting between, the players lying on a CT scanner and kicking a goal in front of 80,000 people. And, but to take an audience, 30 years in a split second in someone's life is actually quite powerful. And we did that in Serial Killers with my own father. So we're trying the same thing again here. And already we released a short piece last year just to promote the movie in Ireland. And it got massive media coverage because these men are icons, and they're still icons in Ireland. So that's, the idea was to just line them up, put them through the scanner and see what condition their arteries are in. And when you get the scan, I mean, it takes about 3 minutes, and you're giving what's called an Agatston score, and that's named after the cardiologist who derived, let's say, the scoring system from the scanning of the arteries. And he's a cardiologist who's actually the author of the South Beach Diet from the 90s. He sold about 26 million books, I believe. And he contacted my co-producer, Ivor Cummins, who works with the Irish Heart Disease Awareness Charity. Ivor's a magnificently talented engineer who's now applying his problem-solving skills to heart disease. And he probably knows more about this scan than anyone anywhere. And Agatston invited them to the States, and they're now doing some work together. But he told them, listen, what you're doing is remarkable. What you're seeing is remarkable. And, we should be collaborating. So, it was a brilliant coup to get these two teams back together again, which was made possible by the IHDA, the concept, and the winning captain, Paddy O'Rourke, from my own county, who became one of the key individuals in the movie at the end of the day. But, getting those guys back together again was, for me, as a fan of the sport, it was hugely enjoyable. So we just hope that when we roll it out in Ireland, that there'll be a very big response, because you're seeing men, Mick Lyons, for example, would be probably like an Ali McCoist figure in Scotland. He's a huge name from that era. And when you see him presenting himself for a heart scan in a gown and, bare feet, as opposed to killing men on the pitch 30 years ago, you just want to trigger a behavioural change in a middle-aged bloke somewhere in Ireland. If he says, well, if Mick Lyons is doing that, maybe I should have a look. And that's all you can hope for. I honestly don't care what anybody eats. I don't care whether they exercise or what they do. I just like to put information out there. If they want to do something with it, fine. If they don't, that's okay too. I will not be losing any sleep.
Yeah, you have to have that. Now, the test that you guys used isn't kind of one that's traditionally used. Would that be fair to say? Can you get it Correct. If you ask for it?
Yes, you can. A lot of doctors, and this is one thing that came up during the course of the movie itself, because when we scanned the players, the results went back into the medical system. So we don't say, there's your score, you're going to drop dead. We obviously had to push the results back to their doctors. And some of the doctors didn't actually know what they were looking at. So that became a challenge for us, because we were working with Scott Murray, he was president of the British Preventative Cardiology Association. He's a fantastic bloke. He's based down in Liverpool. And, Scott was very keen to make sure that nobody was left behind and everybody had the best advice available to them, and so on and so forth. But we did find that some GPs really didn't understand what the test was about, because it would not have been presented to them in their training, for example. So we had to address that. And if you are going to get the test, probably the best place to start and understand what it is and where you go and how you get it is to go to the IHDA website, and they'll show you where some of the scanning centres are. But it's essentially any hospital with a CT scanner. There were 4 in Northern Ireland, for example. And as long as they have the software to accommodate the Agatston score, then you're good to go. And if somebody's middle to high risk, it would be particularly helpful. But that said, we were finding that a high percentage of the players who would have been otherwise deemed low risk were re-stratified on the basis of the scan, and that was really quite scary. So it might be difficult for somebody who doesn't have any symptoms of anything to go in and demand a test, but you can pay for it. You can get them done for, I think, under 200 quid. And as I said at the outset, the average middle-aged bloke, they'll spend 200 quid on their car at the blink of an eye.
Absolutely.
But they should really be, going to see their GP, getting a referral, and if they have to pay for it themselves, step in, because what you want to do with the test is get a benchmark. Once you hit 45 years of age, if you've got a benchmark test, it lets you see at intervals of 5 years if you're scoring a 0 with no calcium in the arteries, or maybe a bit less if you do get a high score and you're trying to do something about that. You've got to know where you're starting from, so it gives you a baseline. So as soon as you get to 45, if you're a man, 50 for a woman, it makes sense to get the test, and then you at least know if you're susceptible to atherosclerosis, irrespective of your weight.
Yes, because that's really what I'm hearing. It doesn't matter how fit you are and how good you look, there still could be that problem inside, and there's really no way. I mean, even your kind of family genetics you could still fall into that vulnerable category. So basically anybody it could, and I think for £200. Right, so say you did get the test, then what? Now, tell us a little bit about your book. Would that be one of the things you would want to do? I mean, there will be people that are watching this that will be vulnerable, that will know already that they're vulnerable. So getting the Pioppi diet book, would that be a good place to start?
Yeah, it would be, of course. I mean, there are general guidelines that will benefit everybody. And Asim, as a cardiologist, for example, he takes a very, very close look. When you're giving population advice, it's a very different thing than an individual sitting in front of you. But population-wise, Asim points to extra virgin olive oil as the base fat of the Pioppi diet. He does that for a number of reasons. But, you've got this debate raging right now about meat, never mind the climate and all of that. But, so the Pioppi diet would recommend some meat, but it's not like a serial killer style diet. Because if you're not under close supervision, there are certainly, there's a percentage, it's probably 20 to 30% of people who are probably, they'll optimize their health better, not necessarily with saturated fats, but with the olive oil type approach. So if you don't know where you sit on that spectrum, Pioppi diet is a great blunt instrument, and as a population measure, it won't leave anybody behind. Let's say the standard ketogenic diet, you see people having wonderful results on those. But one of the key things that we took from extra time and what happened after we followed and tracked one of the players with a particularly bad result, we came to understand the significance of monitoring blood glucose, because it now appears that heart disease is so tightly aligned with the symptoms of type 2 diabetes that they're almost one and the same thing, and let's say in layman's terms. And I think in the 2020s, I think we've taken huge strides against type 2 diabetes in the last decade. And Sami Inkinen, by the way, has led that drive. They started a company called Virta, which has just taken about $93 million in investment in the US. And they have now got 2 years of peer-reviewed data showing that they're essentially reversing type 2 diabetes in about 55% of patients on their protocol. And people get all worked up about what's reversing, Well, the reality is that they're cutting insulin use dramatically, and in some cases they're getting rid of it altogether. Can that person then go back and smash pasta every night? No. So some stick in the muds will say, well, then they're still type 2 diabetic. Well, guess what? There's no requirement for insulin. They're managing it by, manipulating their diet. They're losing weight. All of their markers are improving. That's a win. So that's been done with type 2 diabetes. I think now we're going to see the war against heart disease really step forward in the 2020s. And that's something that I want to be on the front line with Asim and Health, where our partners in Italy on. So we're looking forward to getting into that, because you can talk about all these things, but we now know that blood glucose excursions, particularly after food, are really not helpful and should be managed. And you can argue about how you want to manage those, but we know from what we're seeing, and we'll, in time gather our own more robust data. But if you really want to know where you sit on the spectrum of heart disease, get the CAC scan, get yourself a little blood glucose monitor, and understand what's happening after your porridge. That's what our man in the movie, I won't name him just yet, but people will see that porridge gave him a wildly type 2 diabetic-esque response every single morning. And he'd been smashing it all his life. He couldn't believe it.
Yes.
So that might not happen you, me, or somebody else, but it was happening him. And he was getting huge glucose excursions after consuming porridge. So once you understand the ground rules, try and keep your blood glucose within a reasonably healthy parameters. And then there are some additional vitamins that appear to be helpful. And then you're starting to move towards a pretty robust approach to avoiding heart disease, stroke, and even things like dementia. I was just checking today some of the data on the prevalence of dementia amongst individuals with high calcium scores, and this is calcium scores from way back. These are longitudinal studies, and there does seem to be a pretty powerful relationship. So if there's calcium building up in the arteries, it's building up elsewhere too. You probably find it in the teeth, under the gums. It's the same kind of process, and it's probably happening in the brain area as well. So the soft tissues are under attack, and you don't fix that with a drug. There is no drug right now that will halt calcification of the arteries. We've now seen a regression in calcium scores, and that's a big thing, because the two cardiologists, William Davis and Ross Walker down in Sydney, who between them have done tens of thousands of calcium scores over the years, they're really the only two cardiologists in practice over a long period of time that can say hand on heart, no pun intended, that they don't see events if patients adopt their policies and principles. And that's pretty powerful. And I think everything's moving to the point where you don't die of these things, you die with them. Yes. And that's, if you've got calcium in your arteries, many of us have, that's not necessarily going to kill you. That's moved in there to protect you, but it shows you that you're vulnerable and this process is ongoing. If you can nip it in the bud, your risk profile, the data shows us, goes back to the person next door with zero calcium in their arteries. So it's a very powerful thing to be able to do something to halt the progress of calcium, and it typically increases by 15 to 20% per year, they believe. If you can get that down below 15% that March, your risk collapses. And to put it in perspective, someone with a calcium score of over 1,000, which would put you in the bottom few percentile at any age, your risk of an event over 10 years is probably 20 times that of your next door neighbor who doesn't have calcium in their arteries, irrespective of how fat, overweight, unfit, boozy they might be.
Yes.
If you've been dealt the wrong hand, that's tough. That's just how it is.
Well, that is so interesting, because I'm back living in Argyll, and obviously a lot of people here, and their lifestyles, and you can see what the weight they've been all their lives, and it doesn't seem to have any correlation to how the end of their lives pan out. So that really explains a lot. And I know when I met Dr. Brian Clements from the Hippocrates Institute, he said the number one cause of disease is unstable blood sugar. And in actual fact, I'm running a Balance 2020, I'm calling it, a retreat about food and about all the different kinds of diets and fasting and time restricted eating at the beginning of March in Oban. And I'm going to be using blood glucose monitors, because I think it's a very simple cheap way to just find out what foods are spiking you. And exactly that, porridge might work for one person, it doesn't work for me. I know that from my own, just by how I feel. But I think until you fully are so in touch with the body and say that food didn't really help me, then it's really, we like tests, don't we? We like tests and we like measurements, although we really don't need them per se, but I think they're very helpful to really convince somebody, look, this is what's happened. So I think that's brilliant advice. Thank you so much. So we have the new documentary to look forward to. We have the book, and we'll put links on all of these things. And then we also have your new business. Do you want to just finish off by explaining how you're going to be helping people with this heart disease issue, whether they know they're under threat or not?
Yeah, so Asim and myself have teamed up with a company in Salerno, southern Italy, called Healthware International. And they're a major global sort of consulting and marketing group in the health technology space. They run some fantastic conferences that we've attended. And they approached us after the book broke out to come and present at their big conference in Berlin and, you know, tell their audience, who are predominantly venture capitalists and pharmaceutical companies and people very much in the business, just to explain the power of lifestyle medicine. And I've no interest in, I mean, medicine for me is illness management. I've absolutely no personal interest in that. Asim, as a cardiologist, is an enormous supporter of the NHS. He's an enormous supporter of lifestyle medicine, and he gets into trouble everywhere he goes because he's essentially trying not to have to see people. And you know, it's not a great business model for a cardiologist, but he's very genuinely committed to that. So how do you take a message of lifestyle medicine and the principles that can have a pretty dramatic impact on your metabolic health and scale that up? Because by the time the average person in the UK needs to see somebody like Asim, it's not necessarily too late, but it's already very late in the day, and we know the strain on the NHS at the moment. So it's very, very difficult to get access to that level of expertise. So you know, our Italian partner said, well, let's build a digital platform where, you know, people can essentially almost interact with Asim's methodologies, and the platform is designed to help them you know, import those behaviors into their day-to-day life. So that's what we've done. I mean, it's a platform that it's future-proofed. So when we've spoken about blood glucose readings, for example, one of the most powerful advances in health technology will come very, very soon. And that will be the ability to continuously monitor your glucose from something like an Apple Watch or a device. And this will eventually be a very cheap option and readily available. When that happens, so the Pioppi protocol is the company, and the technology we built would actually read and respond to that data and make recommendations. So right now, the system will ask you at 11 a.m., Lilia, how's your energy today? And it asks you that very simple question because it's actually pretty powerful. If you haven't slept well the night before and or you've eaten the wrong thing for breakfast, you're going to get your mid-morning dip. And if we know that's happening, how you go about the remainder of your day is important. You're going to experience cravings for certain things because your blood sugars are off on a run. And if you know that's coming, you can expect it. You understand what's happening in your body. You'll be warned and given options. You know, don't do this, do this. So the system will understand you and respond to you. And the more information you input to it, the better it will come to know you and hopefully direct you to making better choices in your life. Now, there's a lot of behavioral economics in all of this, and nobody has a magic wand. It is still very, very difficult to influence behavior. Some people are influenced by one thing, others are influenced by others. But the platform will have all kinds of a la carte options. We're working heavily on stress reduction, breathing techniques, and we're working with some great people in that space. Exercise is something that people don't really engage with it until, in our experience, until they've lost the weight and they're starting to feel better. Then they typically start to want to move a little bit more. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg thing there. But these are all individual things. So to build a system that tries to understand and respond to all of these nuances has been very challenging. But it's a system that will improve with time. And what we're planning to now do, we've had some unsolicited approaches from pharmaceutical companies, but we won't be taking any investment from them. We've finalized the beta version of the technology, and I think I'm just busy now preparing a crowdcube campaign. So we'll invite, we've had tens of thousands of people who've followed us very closely down the years, me from serial killers and Asim from back then as well. I mean, he supported serial killers out the gate. So we're going to try and bring the congregation together and see if they can participate in moving the ball forward and trying to combat heart disease. So we'll be making decisions in that company that won't necessarily appeal to savvy investors. We'll be putting money into things like research and trying to play the long game and understand what's really working, as opposed to coming in for the quick hit. So we'd prefer to do it right and get it wrong than do it wrong and maybe get it right financially. And that's just who we are and how we go about our business. So it's not going to be let's say a typical approach to these things, but it's what myself and Asim have always agreed from day one. And as long as we control the company, that's how we'll go about our business.
Absolutely, it has to be the long game, and I think culturally we're so bad. I mean, Indigenous tribes look generations ahead and generations back, and we look at today. What can we get? How much money? And that's what's gone wrong, very wrong in the Western world. So well done you. It sounds amazing and intuitive, and it's kind of AI at its best, really utilising technology to help and empower people to understand and be the best version of themselves. And I suppose a lot of the work I do, it's about feeling safe in your body and enjoying the body rather than thinking it's working against you. So everything you said there just sounds absolutely perfect to me, and I'm really glad that you're on it and making it. It's awesome. So, well, thank you so much. It's exciting times, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the documentary, and I really hope you come and visit me in Scotland and we can get a showing up or get you in front of some of the people. It would be great to have you here. So if you're in the area, keep it in mind.
Well, they might be building that bridge across there if Boris gets his way. So
please don't mention that name. And it's great to see you. Is there anything else you want to add? We'll put all the links for the book, your previous documentaries, when the Kickstarter appeal that you're doing. People want to help, get involved, feel it's something that they resonate with and want to be part of your the new company, then we'll put all the links and people can contact you directly.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots going on, so we'll put the links up and people can
something for
everyone. Watch this. They can jump on board. They can tell other people, and most importantly of all, hopefully some of them will take steps to improve their own health and well-being. That's what it's all about.
Fine, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Donal. Keep in touch, and I'll chat to you soon.
Lilia. Great to see you. Thanks.
You too. Ciao, ciao.